All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to get to introduce a new friend of mine, Spencer Miller, the CEO of Settide. Spencer, thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about Settide. I have to apologize for everyone for the congestion. We'll sound a little bit more obnoxious than usual, so I apologize for that. Settide is a really, really interesting data and analytics company, but specific to photogrammetry. Am I saying that properly, Spencer?
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. So let's just get the quick 30-second overview of what Settide is, what it does, and why it's important.
Cool. I think the quick like two sentence thing is Settide is really focused on helping people do more with photogrammetry. And this is photogrammetry is for those who are unfamiliar. You can take a series of photos and you can basically recreate whatever you took photos of in 3D. You make 3D model, you can make big map of it. And it's just, we're really focused on helping people just explore more and do more with the technology, specifically in one of the things we work on a lot is with coral reef habitats and environments and things like that. Yeah.
I think that's how you and I touch base. We're both
Mhm.
fan of coral reefs, and I'm extraordinarily jealous of you because you live on the beautiful island of Oahu. That's where you are right now.
Yeah. We came out here about 6 years ago. I came out for a master's program in marine biology and marine science, just kind of, I wanted to explore what was coral reef habitats like. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I mean, I'm not, my story isn't I wanted to do this since I was 8. No, I had no idea. Like I was really just kind of exploring things. And so came to grad school. And then like my first semester in grad school, I was actually on Reddit, some online forums, and I came across photogrammetry. People, use it to create 3D models for video games. They use it for cinema effects, when you put backdrops of movies and stuff. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I learned about some researchers for coral reefs, kind of
Mm.
applying it to coral reef habitats, and just that light bulb kind of went off of like, okay, this is really cool. I gotta dive more into this and kind of learn, what I can do and how I can kind of get into this space. Um, so yeah, it's can't complain. It's a great place to live, and super fortunate, and yeah, just trying to do the best we can here.
That's fantastic. Absolutely love it. So let's talk specifically about the technology because, when you and I first had the conversation, I was like, okay, I want to make sure I'm totally tracking with you. It seems like in the last 7 years, every single National Geographic special has something to do with ground penetrating radar. And somebody's going over to, the Mediterranean or to Rome, and hey, we're getting new data that we'd never had before. We're building on all these 3D models. I was like,
Mhm.
Spencer, are we talking about the same thing? And essentially, you're saying, yes, we are. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. So I think photogrammetry kind of falls under this, and I'm by no means like the world industry professional. So photogrammetry falls under this umbrella of 3D reconstruction. So basically, uh, I somehow can recreate my environment, whether that's, using sonar, sending sound and bouncing it off like they use in submarines and stuff, LiDAR, sending light, to bounce off or like you said, penetrate and stuff like that, taking photos, scanning, you're recreating whatever you need to in 3D. And then from there, you can collect obviously much more detailed information, and this specific to photogrammetry, this is applied to tons of different industries. And yeah, you can collect a lot more data than just looking at something or taking a picture of something, or like you said, things that you can't even see, like underground and stuff. So it's yeah, it's taken off definitely in the last few decades. I mean, it goes very well with, computer technology and cameras and sensors, and as those improve, then the overall technology improves. Um, so yeah, it's incredible. I'm still barely scraping the surface of what is out there and what people can do. So it's really interesting.
I love that. And I'm excited to talk specifically about Settide and the tech that you've built. I want to just make sure that we're all understanding the importance of this stuff. So
Yeah.
again, we bonded over coral reefs. You live in Oahu. You know a thing or two about coral reefs. When it comes to the value of having the data, right? So somebody like me, nature lover, love, love being outside, love surfing, love being in the water, but I'm always hearing, hey, coral reefs are dying. We're having all these massive bleaching events. We hear the world's going to hell in a handbasket, right? We hear the negativity all the time.
Yeah.
What you're doing and like what the community that's actually using photogrammetry is like you're actually recording like what is the actual health of these coral reefs, specifically in the Hawaiian archipelago or wherever you may be. you're able to really judge the difference. And like what we do at Social Impact Solutions is we measure social impact, right? We are
Hmm.
measuring what is the change over time, whether that be through like a medical program, whether that be through a disabilities program, whatever it be through public health in some way, shape, or form. You're saying no specifically to coral reef health. And I know photogrammetry can be applied to many different verticals, but we're just going to
Yeah.
talk about coral reefs. You're like, no, we're actually going to measure, are these reefs getting healthier? Are they getting worse? And you have the data to back it up because you're building these 3D maps. I mean, do you want to add a little bit more color to that to really explain like why the photogrammetry is so important?
Yeah, no, I think you opened it up like perfectly. That's exactly what it does. It's another tool in the tool set for like coral reef scientists and environmentalists, conservationists and stuff working for these coral reef habitats. Um, we're able to reap the benefits of this technology, like you said, that's been used in, drone and aerial and other areas. And we can draw that down to underwater habitats because it's a totally different ball game when you take a camera underwater and so many different challenges you got to work with that. I won't dive too much into, but yeah, being able to go out to a reef, swim for, hundreds of meters, hundreds of yards, and capture a huge section of the reef, bring it back to your computer, map it, know exactly where each coral is, collect data. How big is that coral? How big is that? That one's bleaching. What kind of, not only is it bleaching or not, but there's different, from what I've learned in my limited, I'm not an expert on bleaching, but like, where's its threshold? Like, is it in the beginning stages? Is it kind of hitting that mark, or is it at the point of no return and it's going to die? Because some corals do recover, when they bleach, they kind of get bleached a little bit and then they recover. And some, unfortunately, they don't. They're stressed too long in hot water for too long, and it's just, they can't handle it. So being able to take a camera down and capture all that helps us. Number one, like you kind of touched on, we get a digital snapshot. We can create a 3D map in time. It's an archive. So I've worked on some projects where we started doing this in 2018, 2019. I can go back and look at those images. And I actually had somebody a couple years later saying, hey, you did, maps of kind of this area around the island. Uh, we have like this invasive sponge or something. I can't remember what he was looking at. We have this invasive thing. We saw it here and we saw it there. Did you guys see? Could I look through some of those images? And we went through, and sure enough, like back in 2021, we saw, it was on the reef. You could see it, its color and stuff. And he's like, wow, okay. Now we have a historical record that it's been here for X number of years. That's really important information. Um, so it can help create a good visual, it can help you give a good map, which is something harder that people have been doing. And I can, compare the kind of traditional methods here in a sec. But then you can collect, like you said, the growth of those corals. You go back to that reef every couple of months and see how it's doing because the environment's changing. You get different currents and different water temperatures. And sometimes you have a boat come through and rip through the reef, we'll say by accident, or drag its anchor. And so you got to go and you can snapshot that, come back in a year. Is that reef recovering? Did it damage it too much? And that's really important information for, again, all these organizations working with coral reefs, because I just feel like since I got into this, and I'm fairly new in the field, since I got into this, it's like that's the one thing people need is data, is information, and
Right.
being able to back up what they're saying. And I would say most scientists' hunches and experiments are good. They've been able to trying to warn the public, hey, corals are dying, or hey, maybe here corals are doing good, so we need to study them for those reasons as well. But they don't have, I think, all the data they would like to, or at least at the scale. Oh, we did this little coral reef spot. It's like, yeah, but what about the whole island or this whole stretch? Now you can do that. So I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. People have been experimenting a lot and pushing it forward. And I think for the last several decades, surveying and monitoring corals was kind of done the same way. It's a slow process. You go down, you take a tape measure, you kind of visually guess, how's the coral looking? Is it dead? Is it not? And sometimes you need to do that to verify. But you can only, if I don't know how much experience you have with scuba diving and stuff, but you can only stay down as long as you have air and what's safe to do. So sometimes you can only stay down for 30, 45 minutes and that's it. And so you got to scramble and collect as much data as you can. And not, it's not as good as they would hope. So it's really exciting because it's kind of that light bulb moment of like, wow, you can apply this, you can bring the reef back to your computer. You can bring it back on land, so to speak, and you can do whatever you want with it. Anything that you can do in 3D computers and software and all this stuff to collect data, you can now do that with coral reefs. So it's really exciting. It's really cool. And like I said, I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. And Settide is really focused on trying to help people do that. And I think this application of using photogrammetry and coral reef science is very broad still. There's some people who aren't using it. Some people are kind of getting started. And there's some researchers who have been using it for, 8, 10 years, and they're doing excellent work. But that's kind of the 1%ers. There's a lot of in between. So I would like to help people catch up. I would like to help people really give them that good push and like, here's some tools, here's some resources, here's some software can help you get started, help you collect the data you need, and then you guys do the science. You are the experts in the science. You analyze the data and you tell me what it means. But I want to give you guys tools to be able to do that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, for the next foreseeable future. And yeah, so we'll see where it goes.
Very well said. I really appreciate the way you explained that. So most people that are listening to this are either nonprofit leaders or just like social entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form. These are
Mhm.
movers and shakers that want to make a difference. They want to make an impact, which is awesome. Favorite people.
Mhm.
And so they're looking at this from the standpoint of they're almost always being evaluated, right? Like, okay, I'm going to go out and make a difference. And people are like, I need to raise money for it, right? So let's just say it's a nonprofit. I've got to go raise money to attack this problem so we can create this kind of change. The conversation will always go to, well, how do you know it's working, right? Monitoring and evaluation. What's the impact? How do I know your interventions are working? The same way, let's say I needed to change my lifestyle, I get some blood work done, and like, hey, John Mark, you've got to change these 5 biomarkers or you're going to have some other problem that we don't need to get into. There's going to be an intervention. I need to adhere to that intervention. And then 3 months, 6 months, 12 months later, I'm going to get some blood work done, right? And then
Mhm.
be like, okay,
Yeah.
it worked, didn't work, or it stayed the same. And then make suggestions based on that. What you're saying is, and tell me if I'm wrong, please. What you're
Mhm.
saying is you can take those snapshots, right? You can do, if we're going to call this from a public health standpoint, like pre and post surveys. We're going
Mhm.
to take this snapshot. What is the state of the Anini Reef on the North Shore of Kauai? Where is it right now? 70 miles of reef that you've been able to survey. 6 months later, you come back. You're looking at water temperatures, you're looking at inputs, you're looking at everything. You take the
Mhm.
same survey and you're able to know, is it becoming healthier? Is it becoming worse? Is it staying the same? Are there other factors that we're not taking into account? You have the data, is my point. Is like you
Yeah.
actually can say with certainty, this is happening, we need to intervene, and or we need to change, we need to pivot, we need to make some kind of decision because we actually have concrete data that we can run with. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's totally, you're hitting it right on the nail. You need that confirmation, I think, of what's, probably the general public is aware of. Like, they mostly hear the sad news, coral reefs are dying and bleaching and stuff like that. But like I said, there is some good news along the way. But yeah, you need that data, you need to be able to evaluate. And so previously people go out, every 6 months, once a year, they go snorkel or dive, and they take their underwater paper, kind of their clipboard, and they'd write stuff down. They'd write down, they'd try to count how many corals are in a fairly small area, like size of a big room or classroom or something. How many corals there are, are they bleached or not bleached? And then sometimes they take a tech measure down, they try to measure it. But like you said, then the verification part is cool. We got some initial data, fairly small area. Okay. Then they come back 6 months later. There's no real good solid way to go back to that exact same coral. They could probably find the same spot, they mark it with something, or there's a big boulder or something. But it's, reefs do change over time in the matter of months or years. Like I said, uh, natural changes, like where we live, sea turtles all the time come and, nibble at algae, and they might run into a coral and knock it off, or, if it, like, it's always physically changing. So being able to compare that to what's changing due to climate change is, yeah, you just need more data. You not you you know The age old story is like, oh, more data, more data, more data. We can never just have enough, but it's more accurate data. So being able to monitor, okay, if I just monitor that one coral and I kind of eyeball guesstimate it's a foot tall, or I can get the surface area and the volume. I can measure the number of branches because maybe it's a coral that grows branches. I can get the color pigmentation, all this different stuff, much more accurate data. and then scale that. Like you said, with these big reef maps, you can do that for hundreds, thousands of corals. So being able to do that here 6 months, year, 2 years later, you can verify either number one, what's happening just naturally if you leave the reef as is, or number two, people who are, big thing is restoration. Scientists and these practitioners and nonprofits are like, we got to do something, you know? And so taking corals from different spots and moving them, or a lot of labs that I work with, they work a lot more with genetics. So they grab pieces of coral or tissue samples, they put them through temperature treatments and stress them and basically say, is this coral going to do better in hot water environment? Is this coral going to do worse? And the ones that do better, they're like, hey, let's focus on those. Let's outplant. Let's put those out on the reef. But then, like you said, you got to monitor, you got to verify what you're doing. And some of the projects I've worked on, for the corals they've outplanted, 400 corals, 80% of them are still there and alive, and they've grown 2 to 3 times their size, which is great. But then again, if you want to do your due diligence, it's like, oh, don't take that at face value. We also measure corals that we didn't touch, that are just on the reef, kind of our control of how are these corals doing? Oh, they also grew about 2 times, or oh, maybe they grew less, or and then you can compare what we're doing, as an organization is number one working, and how is it comparing to, not doing anything, kind of the control. But you need that. And so I think people are itching for that. You see, at least here in Hawaii, a lot more restoration projects, a lot more collaboration, a lot more need for that data. I was just talking with somebody the other day, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're kind of getting into photogrammetry, and we've mapped a couple reefs, like a 20 foot by 20 foot area, just really small." I was like, "That's great, great start. It's you got to start somewhere." And they said, "Oh, but we have all these corals in our nursery tanks, where we hold them to, do those temperature treatments and kind of check them out, or maybe we took them from an area that was a lot of times they'll take corals that were dredged if it's like a harbor or something like that honest always gets dredged every couple of years, and they got to scrape it so then the boats can fit through. They got to Some projects will remove the corals from those, and then they got to relocate them, so they have these corals that need to be relocated. And I said, you can do photogrammetry with those too. You can scan those corals and get the growth, so then when you put them out in the field, you can also verify, does it do better in the tank on land, kind of in an aquarium environment, or does it do better in the natural habitat? And they were kind of like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. And so we're kind of having conversations about that. So being able to verify what you're doing is huge for, I say scientists, but a lot of these practitioners, and not just having more data, but the right kind of data to be able to show, like you said, that before and after. Having a visual is always a plus. If here's a 3D model of a coral, and people maybe have never seen coral reefs, it's a really cool thing to look at. But yeah, being able to get that before. So that's one of the coolest things that I think I've been able to be a part of, is like, now that I have a couple projects that we've been going to for 4 or 5 years, it's like, wow, we have like, we're starting to get into historical data. It's really cool that we can get that type of information.
But that's so good because you're also able to record this so much faster and more accurately, right? So
Yes.
Steve the component here, right? It's you with, a specialty camera with your fins on, cruising up and down this reef.
Hmm.
Rather than, okay, let's get this tape measure out, and you're in a current. I mean, I
Yeah,
get
it's hard.
okay,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And then you have limited view where you're dealing with these ultra high tech cameras that pick up things that the human eye can't pick up. So like there's
Yeah.
really important things. So speed and accuracy, which are two really, really important components when it comes to anything in life.
Yeah.
You're able to do that so much more effectively. What I love though, and this is where the set tide conversation comes in, because you didn't invent photogrammetry, right?
No.
That's the thing that you did. You're not claiming to, so
No.
I'm not saying that. But you did something very special, right? You did something very unique and very important, specifically for the practitioners out there, for the world changers out there. They're saying, okay, that's awesome. I want to do something. Talk a little bit more about what Settide has done and the environments in which you make people's lives a whole lot easier when it comes to these 3D models.
Yeah. I think to kind of give a background is it kind of started, I feel like a lot of things nowadays, it's started in COVID, or something like that. But I it just happened to be I was in grad school, and I was also interning at some of these labs, and I was involved with there was a bleaching event at the time in 2019 here in Hawaii. Um, and so I was kind of in charge of doing all the photogrammetry for stuff. And they were just day-to-day tasks and data we need collected. I was like, there's got to be an easier way. It's, it's falling on my lap. I not only want to impress my group and good data, but like I need to make my life easier. This is, I'm doing things that take me hours to do.
True
And
entrepreneur, right? True
I,
entrepreneur goes like, hey, there's got to be
I
a
mean,
better
I
way
would,
to do this.
I wasn't thinking that at the time. I was just like, the very first thing I built, and it's still, I don't know, I still kind of get like, not like emotional, but like, wow, and it sounds really silly, but like the first tool I built, I'm not a programmer, I don't have coding experience. I kind of just Googled and just learned as I needed to collect distance measurements to be able to, when you build these maps, you got to also tell the computer how big the coral is because the computer will build the map, but then you got to tell it, this coral is, 20 feet big or it's 200 feet big. And then once you tell it that, you scale it, then, okay, I can go and trace some corals or, collect data to scale to the proper scale. Um, but I was always trying to verify that and I'd collect distances of things and then verify that with the distance I got and basically collect my error. Oh, I'm 5% off or 10% off or blah, blah. But I was doing that 20, 30 times a day and I had to do that by hand and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, there's not only a better way that's faster, but there's got to be a more accurate way because I can even see where I'm messing up. And so, long story short, I learned how to do that programmatically where I could just click a button and it collects the distance and a box pops up and says, hey, this distance is, 12.32 whatever centimeters. And I just sat back in my chair. I was like, oh my gosh, I invented a rocket. I just thought I was like, this is amazing. And I used that tool, only that tool. I had no intention to do it for like months. And then I was like, okay, I want to do this. Okay, I want to do this. I want to do this. After I did that for like 6 months or so, um, somebody else came to me because I collaborate a lot of people, and they basically were like, "Hey, we need to do this." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I think I can get that working." A couple weeks later, I had another little tool built. I was like, "Here, try this," and then they kept coming back. Oh, can you do this? Can you do this? And then it kind of just steamrolled from there. So, um, yeah, I don't want to like get too much off topic, but basically it started from that. And then it's like, okay, if I'm doing this, I'm working with photogrammetry pretty much every day. It's my bread and butter. I'm working in these core habitats. I'm collaborating. I have lots of people that I know are also doing very similar things. Like I would love to share these with them. And at the time I wasn't worried about a, business or anything like that. I was just like, if I'm using it, there are definitely other people out there who need this. Might even be other people who already did this, but at least in my immediate network, I'm sure there's people gonna help. And that first person that came to me and was like, they literally like they clicked the button, they collected the data, and I had it spit out in an Excel sheet, and they were like, "Wow!" And when I heard that, "Wow," I was like, "Sweet, all right, I'm on to something." Like that's awesome. So now it's one of the things that Settide is doing is with the data collection side, we use a photogrammetry software called Metashape. It's not our own, but it's probably in the top 3 or 4, definitely top 5 photogrammetry softwares worldwide. It's used, like we mentioned in the beginning, aerial surveying, agriculture, construction, cinema effects, all these different fields. So it's a professional software. It's really robust, great stuff. A lot of people in the conservation environmental field use it as well, specifically in coral reefs. I think it's kind of word of mouth, but it's a really good tool. And so I know lots of people are working with this and they need to collect this data. So I kind of thought, okay, let me try to like build something. And I know like myself, as much as I'm learning coding, I don't want to code everything I have to do. It's cool, lots of people like to, but a lot of the people I'm working with, they're already limited on time. They're already limited on resources. They don't need to learn a brand new thing that most people go to school to learn. So I thought, okay, if I can just build something that they can just click a button, selects from some options, export it in a nice, Excel file and do their normal data analysis, that'd be great. And so that's kind of what I've been focusing on. So software is called Add Tools for Metashape, like additional tools, but Add Tools because I didn't really know what to call it. And that's what it is. It's just additional tools that you could do in this software that mostly are focused on data collection because that's where I need them. And I know a lot of my colleagues and stuff need them. So rather than exporting to a different software, learning how to use that, rather than coding yourself, it's like, nope, you can just click some buttons, do it all in software. You already paid for that software, so let's use it to its fullest. And you get data. And to, I guess, kind of give some comparison. So if I mapped a reef like 100 yards and I'm monitoring, let's say 100 corals, normally people would export that image or that 3D map to another software and try to, annotate or trace or whatever those 100 corals, maybe try to collect the area. And that's kind of where that journey ends. maybe a smarter scientist exports it, does some coding, collects surface area, volume, maybe a few other health metrics. That's kind of where that journey ends. But a vast majority of the people don't know how to do that and don't want to do that, like myself. So you can do that all in the software, just clicking a few buttons. And yeah, and I'm obviously still building, and I'm currently developing kind of the next big release to launch out to people, within this next month. But yeah, it kind of really started. There's tools that I use. There's no doubt there's tools that other people use. And it's really exciting to hear people like, wow, that's gonna help so much. Or on the flip side, they're like, that's great, but could you do this?
Hmm.
And it's like, I'm not gonna get offended, like, oh, you didn't, but look at what I did. It's more like, oh, cool. There's obviously more out there that I don't know people need. So yeah, yeah, that's kind of
It's
where
so
I've,
good.
where I've been going. Yeah.
I mean, just think about it from the standpoint of if anyone's ever used Google Sheets, right? So Google
Hmm.
Sheets, spreadsheet, they have add-ons, right? The
Hmm.
things that Google Sheets can't do that other people needed to do. So smart
Yep.
people like Spencer said, hey, we're going to build some more tools on here. It's going to be in the Google Sheets ecosystem.
Exactly.
You might have to pay for, you might not have to. You typically do.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. Like you've done the same, you built this new ecosystem. What was the, is Metashape? Is that the name of the,
That's the parent, the main photogrammetry software, and then ours is add tools for Metashape. Yeah.
all right, which is perfect. So just think of
Yep.
like Google Sheets add-ons. It's the same thing that you've done in that same
Hmm.
that parent company, which is so awesome because you've had this problem that you were dealing with, like you said, 30 times on a daily basis. You're like, there's no way
Hmm.
that this can't be the only way to do this.
Yeah.
Built it out, right? It's awesome. It's about as good as it comes. I mean, it's the eat your own dog food kind of thing when it comes to entrepreneurship. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I've learned that exactly. And I've learned that there are other, there's obviously other, I don't want to say similar tools, but there are other things that people were trying to use or whatever. But I kind of had two goals in mind of like, number one, build tools that I would use. And if I'm using it, probably other people would use. Because if I don't even want to use my own product, then how can I share that with somebody else? It's just, I, if I don't even like it, why would I promote it to somebody else? So I use all these tools for my work on a daily basis. So something that I can use. And then number one, I got to package it a way that non-technical people can use. I don't, we're definitely not in the day and age where if we buy a car, we either go to lot or get it shipped to us, but they don't send us the wheels and the tire, the frame and the hood separately for us to build. Maybe some enthusiasts, but 99% of people, we don't do that. We buy it all as one. And that's what I want to do. Like a lot of plugins for Google Sheets. It's like download, great. I can, run this statistical analysis or do this or this finance sheet or whatever out of the box. And that's another thing that a lot of scientists and researchers, they struggle with. They have all these great ideas and they want to develop things, but they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the funding to carry it. So sometimes they can't quite take it to what they want. So that's why I like to collaborate with a lot of these organizations, nonprofits, to be like, I know you guys maybe have tried to develop something cool. I'm kind of doing something similar. By all means, do you want to work on this together? Or why don't I develop this for you? So then you don't have to do that. And you guys can focus on whatever you got to do, the science and the community outreach and education, whatever else they're doing. So
I think that's so good to piggyback on right there because you're talking about like what kind of impact do you want to create for scientists, nonprofit leaders, social entrepreneurs? Like, hey, listen,
mhm,
you have your skill set, right? You've spent decades honing your own skills. This shouldn't be the thing that stops you from accomplishing your goals. The statistical
mhm,
analysis, everything that you've done, with Settide. That is such a huge gift that you're giving to the community. Like, hey, listen, killer platform, right? This is a great thing to do. Photogrammetry is an amazing thing.
mhm.
However, there's an aspect of it that will hold you back, and unless you want to go get a degree in computer science and all sorts of nights and weekends, this will stop you from getting to where you need to go.
Yeah,
That's the problem that you're solving. That's why I love social entrepreneurs like you. It's just like, this is what we're solving. It's a huge thing, but it doesn't, not that this is a small thing because we both love coral reefs. We love
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It doesn't just apply to our favorite thing. It applies
yeah,
to agriculture. It applies to, so many different aspects, right? Talk
yeah,
about some other applications if you don't know.
yeah. So one good example is and kind of talking about collaborating. I was on another Zoom call a couple months ago. This kind of environmentalist, or I don't want to say environmentalist, like environmental consultant, She's kind of a surveyor and stuff like that up in Canada. And we had an awesome conversation. Her husband is the computer science guy, but she has been in the business for like 30, 40 years. I kind of asked her, I was like, why aren't you retired? She's like, I just love it. But she she was kind of sharing me what, environmental consulting and land surveys and agriculture people, the kind of things we need. And I described one of my tools that, hey, there's one tool that kind of similar, take an image, collect data. This had to do with collecting like slope and like land change and terrain analysis, which a lot of like geography land professionals use. And I was like, I really want to integrate some of those tools because I want to integrate them into core reef analysis because people are kind of itching to use those. But I also know that other people have already been using it. Like, does this sound like a good idea? And she's like, wait, you can do that in this tool? Kind of like, well, I was like, yeah, you can do this. She's like, no way, send me the website. And I sent it and showed it to her and back and forth. She's like, this is great. I had to export my data to a different software and do this or that, which is great. But like, man, this isn't like rocket science data I need. It's just the quick, simple stuff. So environmental, surveying, agriculture. I worked on another project where a guy was surveyed a big land area and he was working on a vineyard. And he said, I need to know which parts of the land are certain slope. So then when we, install kind of our water system, we can know the erosion levels and the water runoff and stuff like that. It's got to be below, I forgot what it was, like 12.5 degrees or something like that. He's like, can you collect that information in these kind of 4 specific spots? It's just one piece of data, but again, you'd have to do this in a different way. And I said, yeah, no problem. Hour later, had the data, and that was kind of the end of that project. But he's like, wow, this is great. Like, I know this one spot, I probably won't, put my crop stuff out there, but these other 3 spots look like good viable options. I'll probably pick the lower, flatter one, whatever reason. But it's like, yeah, there's so many different applications. I'm building one tool where a lot of people work in like the 3D game kind of industry. They'll scan, objects and then they maybe put them on online marketplaces to sell, or they use them to develop into, video games or mobile apps and stuff like that. They said, oh, we always have to convert to, for a certain environment we want to work in, we got to convert to a certain file type. I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Went away, like, cool, here's a little tool. So now just when you export it, check this box, convert it to that file format instead of having to do something else. Like, great. So, and that's a very, very simple example, but I think it's applicable to so many different fields, and it works both ways. It's like, I can hopefully provide more tools, but the more I learn what other people need, I can not only hopefully build tools and things that they want to use, but also I can apply that back to like you said, more of the social impact stuff. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm just trying to learn what's out there. Like, oh, these people in agriculture are using this core. They collect this measurement. Can we do that for coral reefs? Cool. Let me like figure out how to like bridge those two. And now I've got 2 different end users. I've got people in the coral reef space, got people in the agriculture space who both benefit from this product. But yeah, there's just so many really cool applications, really cool tools out there that kind of the more you collaborate with, the more you can share, and everybody kind of benefits, and that's kind of one of the other things that, when I was a student, you kind of we hear this from our parents and grandparents. Oh, back in my day, things were so much harder, kind of thing. And I don't want to go down that road. I've, I've had it easy, born in the digital age, computers are amazing. We didn't have to, running water, all that good stuff. But it's like, okay, I spent 3 months during one summer, and I told my wife, and I was like, I'm just going to work part-time, and the other, 20, 30 hours a week, I'm just going to teach myself how to do this. And we had some pretty strong discussions about that because, we were young students and we needed the money, but I was like, trust me, I need to learn this skill. I'm not going to learn it anywhere else. And so I just spent 3 months, sat down, YouTube videos, read the manual, and just played with the software. Basically pressed every button and was like, what does that do? What does that do? What does that do? Just trying to learn, because I knew if I want to like do anything, I got to do it myself. So I really, kind of going back to one of our first points, is I really want Settide to be a place that can help people, obviously, with these specific situations, collect data, being able to help with monitoring and verifying what they're doing, but hopefully give people a platform to start and to learn, to kind of get started with this. People want to do it themselves. If they want to start from scratch, they don't have to really start from scratch. They can at least get a little bit of a help, So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do is teach people, but learn at the same time. So.
Oh, good. That's so good though. I mean, just think about this. I was thinking with a nonprofit that we used to work with years ago that did a lot of tree planting, right? They worked in an
Hmm.
area that had been severely deforested. And so they were dealing with all sorts of erosion, hurricane, flood, landslide, the whole thing, right? It was just,
Yeah.
and so they were planting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trees. Well, then you go back a couple of years later, these trees are more mature. There's grass now, like there's all sorts of
Hmm.
changes. And then you have a
Hmm.
huge rain and nothing happens. And you're like, oh, how great now. And then it's an afterthought. You never think about it. But if you have the data pre, this is what the world looked like. Post, this is what it looks like now. Then we had this big event, a hurricane comes through, and
Hmm.
you're not dealing with slides, you're not dealing with erosions, you're not dealing with houses being swept away. But
Hmm.
so many nonprofits are trying to work towards one thing, that's community resilience, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be measurable in some way, right? That's not just a financial metric,
Yeah.
right? There's so many other ways to measure that as well. You know, drones, you can buy a drone in Walmart today. I mean,
Yeah.
drones are so ubiquitous. It's not, 2003 where the US military was the only thing that had drones. We
Hmm.
live in a world where I don't know exactly the kind of camera, and you can add more light to this, but it's like, yeah, you have to have a specific camera, but now we can analyze it and we can do something with this data. Like,
Yeah.
so important. And that's the difference in qualifying for grants that change the future of your organization from a financial standpoint, but
Hmm.
most importantly, change the impact, like the lever that you can pull from an impact standpoint, because you're able to serve more people and you're able to measure the pre, the post, the during, however many measurements you have to do. And you're able to use tech in ways that were unfathomable. Again, the equivalent of somebody scuba diving with a tape measure. I mean,
Yeah.
that right there versus, yeah, we flew a drone over for 30 minutes, exported this using Settide. Now we have data.
Yeah.
It's not the same work, right? We're not talking about the same things.
No, yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's funny you mentioned like reforestation because that's like one of the things that, some I've talked with some kind of coral reef, restoration, conservation kind of groups and stuff is, you know, forest or reforestation has been going on for, long, long time. Um, it's obviously on land, so it's totally different. Once you get underwater, the game changes. But, on land, it's yeah, like, hey, this field was wiped out, whether it's naturally by fire, like you said, rains, or people just, cut it down or whatever, let's replant. And a lot of great efforts going out there. A lot of those things I've noticed that we're trying to kind of learn from that. I think not necessarily from the science or technical side, like trees are kind of, or like corals, or corals are kind of like trees in their own respective environments. Like they are the real estate providers. They are kind of the promoters of a lot of things and lots of other plants. Um, and corals are kind of the same way with reefs. They are the main real estate. They are all the condos and how apartments that all the animals can live in. And once those are gone, those animals got to go somewhere else. They provide lots of food. It's just this whole ecosystem. Even in a small reef, you can go in a reef where it's surrounded by sand and there's a small football soccer field size reef, and it's got thousands of fish and sharks and all these things from it's its own oasis, just like a forest would be. So yeah, and being able to translate that, collecting the data, the map, and being able to translate that to, like you said, a social impact or whatever impact, whatever your mission is super important. I think that's to be transparent, that's something that I struggle with is trying to tell, my story and share not only what Settide does and what the impact has, but then also help other people. And it's like, shoot, if I can't even like share what my impact is, then yeah, when these people come to me and say, hey, we need your help, or, if I want to consult on something or whatever, okay, we want to collect this data. How do we share our story? I'm like, yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out too. And so, yeah, you really need to be able to present what you're doing in a measurable way, like you said. Because yeah, that's how most people are going to measure impact. Whether that's, I know on land, it's sometimes they can measure, and I'm probably going off on a tangent here, but you can measure, the land damage. So okay, how many millions or billions of dollars did this hurricane that came through, and then the government can assess and send out those aid packages and stuff like that, whatever they do. Um, but it's like it's different for coral reefs, and they're starting to do that. There's some organizations where they're trying to do like blue insurance and stuff to get governments to kind of you know do money. I don't know all the weeds in between, but yeah, it's hard when you get these environments that get destroyed. And since it's underwater, most people don't see it, so they don't really know. And day to day, they might not feel the impact, but places here like Hawaii, where you drive, going up north on Kamehameha Highway, and if there's a high tide, 2 feet above the normal tide, waves are splashing over the freeway. And it's like, okay, so there's sea level rise. There used to be nice, healthy reefs there that were basically the bushes or the fence that prevented that erosion and those waves from coming through. Now they're just steamrolling on a runway to just go straight to the road. And those highways, since we've lived here the last 5, 6 years, have gone through so many repairs. And that's a much bigger issue that can speak on. But it's all kind of connected, trying to be able to present your social impact in a way that can really hit home to people who may not be doing what you do on a day to day. It's yeah, it's very much something that I'm trying to figure out as well. So, but it's
Yeah,
super important.
I love that. I just think it's so important that we're always trying to sort of triangulate and get closer and closer and closer to irrefutable evidence of change. It's a phrase that I really
Hmm.
love, because we're all, as impact investors, as social entrepreneurs, as people who want to do good, we're all just trying to sink our teeth into something that we can really believe in, right? Like something
Yeah,
that we can really hang your head on. Be like, yes, this is happening. Whatever this is, this problem is occurring. These improvements are occurring. Like this is happening. But we need hard data to back it up. Like it can't
yeah,
just be, you know what, this summer is a lot hotter than it was 5 years ago. So global warming is real. It's like, people
yeah,
need, hard evidence. The medical
yeah,
field, I feel like pioneers this for the most part really well, because we have
yeah,
blood tests, we have all sorts of, highly, highly rigorous tests that we put people through to determine what's going on. The more social entrepreneurs, and that applies to nonprofit leaders, applies to social entrepreneurs, like from a business standpoint, the more we can look back towards the data and lead towards irrefutable evidence of change, the
hmm,
better off we're going to be. Because just like what you're saying, you know, sea tides, like not sea, I mean, oceans are rising, right?
yeah,
You see that a lot more than I do. I live in Oklahoma, right? I don't see the ocean rising every single day, right? It just
yeah,
we don't have that here, right? About
yeah.
as central United States as you can ask for.
That's
You
true.
live, and you're like, wow, man, we've got some serious issues. But having the data to back it up is like, this is what we're seeing, and this is you see the projections over the next 50 years. It's not great, you know,
Yeah,
not great. And so the more we can call people back to hard evidence, and I know this is an election cycle, is up, but nonpartisan, all of that, we have some decisions to make.
yeah,
But based on what criteria? That's what I love about what you're providing people, is you are providing them the criteria. You're providing them the evidence. That's what
yeah.
the accuracy. It's such a huge gift that I feel like Settide is providing for its people.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you touch on that is yeah, I mean, we're really just trying to help people do what they're already doing, but hopefully better. So many organizations, so many researchers, scientists have incredible experiments, incredible ideas, incredible knowledge, much more than I do. I mean, I work with coral reefs, and so people ask me, what do you know? But I probably know maybe a hair more than what Nat Geo shows you, every week or something. I I I work with these groups, but I'm not the professional. These scientists, these restoration practitioners, these conservation, members, they really know. And living in Hawaii, living in kind of a Polynesian, former Polynesian country and stuff like that, there's people here who have decades, hundreds of years of environmental information through their cultural lineage and stuff. And so, we could go down that path of all the things that they've been able to do, and then being able to, we're trying to work with communities, or at least just open those relationships of how, there's a really good lab I work with, the Core Resilience Lab at University of Hawaii. They do that a lot, and some other people. They work with community members to be like, here's what we're doing on the science, kind of Western science side of collecting this irrefutable data. But you guys also have irrefutable data in your own way that you've collected through the years. We gotta, how can we combine those? How can we make it double irrefutable, even stronger? Because just the way the system works, like you said, getting grants, getting funding, getting support, whether that's financial or other ways of support, people want to see that evidence, and a lot of times, talking story with people and sharing stuff is one great way and a very valuable way. And then in other situations, getting that raw data and those numbers is another great way, and they can complement each other very well. So that's kind of what we've, since living here in Hawaii, originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm not, part of that culture in that way, but working with those people and learning about that is super important because, like many other environmental places, they impact the environment that they're in. So being able to collect more information, more data about the coral reefs here is definitely beneficial for the people who live here, who rely on going fishing on these reefs. I talk with uncles, out here we call them uncle, older guys out here fishing and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, when I was a kid, I would catch a fish this big, now it's only this big, or, somebody, or there were more fish, or I used to go this fishing spot, but now that's a harbor or this, things change. And so, yeah, being able to provide with Settide, being able to provide people with a tool to all the different tools they can use. I mean, coral reef conservation is a huge, broad envelope, but being able to provide them with the tool like ad tools to help you collect data more accurate, faster, easier, can hopefully help their mission that much more. And even along with these community members as well. So yeah, it's something that oddly enough, I'm passionate about. I don't know how I got passionate about coral reefs. There are definitely people who show that passion in probably much stronger ways than I do. But I'm probably as much or even more passionate about the technology because I just see all these cool things. Yeah, it can be used for, military and drones and all this other great, valuable stuff in your own opinion, your own right. But all these other social and environmental ways that can be used is just, it's incredible. All this stuff we have at disposable, but not a lot of people have access to it or know how to use it or kind of have the bandwidth to, learn it. So trying to help bring that to more people along the way is super important. But yeah, I know I kind of went in a bunch of different directions, but that's kind of how I see, you know, where things can hopefully go. But yeah, being able to collect that information and help people with their impact is it's gonna drive the message more. I think a lot of people know, they kind of know oh yeah, coral reefs are bleaching. Oh yeah, they're dying. Now it's kind of okay, that was phase one, just sharing the story. Phase two is, here, let me show you some pictures and videos. Oh yeah, we saw in the news, corals are dying. But society is so much more complex, and it's okay, now it's okay, we surveyed a mile or half a mile of reef. We collected all this data, blah blah. We presented it to funders, to governments, blah blah. Like you said, we've been using this term a lot, irrefutable. This is what's going on. Sometimes people try to convert that to a monetary, this is how much money it's going to cost to restore. If we conserve or restore it now, this is projected how much money it's going to save from waves washing up and road damages and urban effects and stuff. So yeah, it's a big thing that needs to be worked on even more. That's people have been making great progress, but hopefully Settide can play some small role in helping people accomplish whatever they want to.
I think it's so good. So, I mean, if there's anyone listening that has aerial surveys that's using photogrammetry in any way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
I don't. This is something you should consider, right? You should go to settide.com. That's the website, correct?
Yeah.
We're talking about an easy to install, easy to participate with platform, not complicated. It's not crazy expensive, by any way,
No.
any
No.
measure, any kind. It's built for academics. It's built for nonprofit leaders. It's built for social entrepreneurs. It's built for hobbyists, right? So, best friend in the whole world, my roommate in college, is a hardcore videographer. I mean, just has a
Cool.
great videography business. I mean, he uses technology like this that would benefit. This would be so beneficial for a lot of his work. And so, I just don't think it should be oh man, this is out of reach. That's what Spencer's done. He's taken the out of reach and put it within arm's reach, right? That's the whole thing here. And you put
Yeah.
together a really cool guide. You want to talk about this? This guide that you're releasing soon?
Yeah. So yeah, so like I said, this technologies and what we're building at Settide is really applicable to any field, but my primary kind of market, I guess, or the people I work with is in coral reef habitat and restoration conservation. So I've kind of over the years, I've trained, I've taught so many people, I've learned myself of kind of almost every step along the way of getting started with photogrammetry, to how do I take photos underwater, to how do I build 3D maps, how do I collect data. And then it's just the more and more, I started building this step-by-step guide, or how-to guide, out of my own sanity of not repeating the same email. Like, let me just go to this guide, just look at it. If you have any questions, let me know. But then it kind of turned into like a pride of like, no, I want to make this thing really, really useful for everybody, useful for a student like myself, high school student even, just starting out, to an industry professional who probably knows a lot of this and knows how to do a lot of this, but maybe there's a few things or a few troubleshooting tips or things that, they can take away from this. So I really wanted to create it. I've read other helps and how to's, and I'm super grateful for YouTube videos and other things out there. But I wanted to create something that was a balance between educational, of teaching you some of the basics of photogrammetry, because when you learn a new skill, whatever that is, you got to kind of learn about the skill a little bit, of how it works. You do got to learn how to walk before you run, and sometimes it's I just need to walk a little bit and then I can run, or sometimes I got to walk a lot. So I don't want to make this a semester course just about photogrammetry, but there were so many instances where people kept asking me questions of how do I apply this to core habitat. So I created basically or I'm almost done creating a full step-by-step guidebook of start to finish. What do you do? How do you apply this technology to coral reef habitats? And it's, on our website, it's kind of in progress, posted it on LinkedIn and kind of mentioned it briefly. It got more hits than I thought. I think I don't want to bore you with the numbers, but yeah, it got,
A lot of people really liked it. I'll just put it that way. A lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people like it, which I was surprised. I was just like, hey, here's this guide. I know a few of people have kind of asked. It's a work in progress, but I just want to get the word out there that it's coming soon. And it was mostly because I was like, okay, I've kind of exhausted my immediate network. So anybody else out there who would like other things that I could include, because I'm kind of wrapping it up. And yeah, lots of people mess, oh, this is great, this is great. We could really use this. And then some people are like, oh, it'd be nice if you had this or whatever. So it's been, again, mutually beneficial. But it's a complete guidebook. It's all online, so you don't need to like download or anything. You just kind of click through the pages. You know, I kind of wanted that balance of educating people on like what is photogrammetry. So there's like one page about like what is photogrammetry, history of where it started, hundreds of years ago, just small paragraph. And then, okay, how do we apply this to coral reef habitats? Here's some examples of camera stuff to use and blah, blah. But I also didn't want the focus of like telling people what to do. And I know people like that. They're like, oh, just tell me what to do. It's like, I made it as a guide. I really want to guide you. I give you suggestions, sometimes strong suggestions, hey, you really should use this. But so many people, for example, so many people ask me, what camera should I use? And I know you kind of mentioned it. It's like, yeah, the age old story is you pay more, you pay for what you get. So a probably more expensive camera is probably going to be better. But if you don't have access to a $2,000-3,000 camera, it doesn't mean you can't do this. It doesn't mean you can't start learning. So a lot of people have GoPros, which, those images kind of look a little distorted on the edges. So it's not the best, but it's like you can get something out of it. You can use your cell phone. It's like, if that's all of what you got, then start from there, start learning how to do it. And then later down the road, hopefully when you or your organization get a little more cash, then yeah, let's work us on refining this and get some better equipment. But for now, just get started, And so, yeah, it kind of goes through, people can use this guide to apply to entire coral reef habitats. People can apply this to research experiments that they're focusing on individual corals that they can scan and collect data from, and kind of anything in between. So yeah, that's available on our website. At the very top menu bar, there's a learn and then coral reefs. They can go there. I can obviously share the link that you can post with this as well. Yeah, hopefully it helps people out there. I'm really not, yeah, just trying to do that. So
Yeah, and it's just, and again, it's Settide with two T's. Settide,
mhm.
super easy to get to, great website, easy to navigate. But man, I really appreciate you being here today. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think this is solid. I'm so excited to get to share you with other people. Not that you needed
No,
the
I
help.
appreciate it.
Posts are blowing up, but I think it's just a fun thing to get to talk about and get to share with the world.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, since our first conversation, I feel like we chatted for like 30 plus minutes, and I already have learned a lot and try to apply to a lot of what, you guys are doing at social impact, stuff like that. So it's been, like I said, it's been mutually beneficial. I've been able to grab some really helpful things on your guys' website and what we've had conversations about, hopefully apply it to Settide and yeah, hopefully make people, make some awesome changes out there and make the world a better place, as we all say. So
Trying to do. Like, yeah, I forgot to mention this earlier. It's Spencer Miller on LinkedIn.
yes.
Spencer Miller on LinkedIn, Settide with two T's.
Hmm.
Keep up the good work, Spencer. I appreciate you being here today.
I appreciate it, John Mark. Awesome talking to you.
Thank you.
All right.